Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Back in 2008, my life was falling apart. I had just left my husband after catching him cheating for the third time. I was 25, broke, and trying to pick up the pieces of my life. I had a decent job at a retail store, but it wasn't enough to cover rent on my own. That's when a new girl started working with us. She was 38, had been married a few times, and seemed friendly enough. Her kids lived with their dads, which should have been a red flag, but I was desperate for a roommate. When I mentioned I was looking for someone to split rent on a new apartment, she eagerly offered to be my roommate. We'll call her Karen. At first, everything seemed fine. We moved into a nice two-bedroom place, split the bills equally, and I thought I had found the perfect roommate. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. I got a better paying job, started hanging out with friends, and even had a casual friend who would visit a few times a week for some adult fun. Nothing serious, just two adults having a good time. Karen seemed okay with it on the surface. My friend never hung around the apartment, never ate our food, never used our stuff. It literally affected her 0%. But I could tell she was jealous that I was getting attention, and she wasn't. She would flirt with him whenever he came over, even went to visit him at his workplace. He wasn't interested at all, which I think made her even more bitter. Karen was seeing this guy who worked night shifts. He would stop by for maybe 30 minutes after work, but he already had a girlfriend he was committed to. I tried to warn her about all the red flags, but she insisted she was in love with him. This dude would hit on me constantly right in front of her. He was completely open about having a girlfriend, but somehow Karen thought this was going somewhere. After a few months, I met someone I really liked. We'll call him my boyfriend. Things got serious pretty fast, and since he was living in a terrible situation, he moved in with Karen and me after about a month of dating. We discussed splitting the bills 3 ways to keep everything fair. We had our room, she had hers, and we shared the kitchen, living room, and bathroom. That's when Karen completely lost it. She started openly hitting on my boyfriend right in front of me. Every guy who came over, even just friends, she had to flirt with. None of them were interested, and I think that rejection drove her over the edge. Over the next couple of weeks, Karen did a complete 180. She stopped paying rent entirely. She refused to buy any food and would just eat whatever my boyfriend and I bought. She stopped washing her dishes completely. We each had a cat, and she would never clean the litter box in her room. Every single day when I came home from work, there was a huge pile of cat poop right inside the front door with a giant puddle of urine. My cat was locked in my room at night with her own supplies, so there was no way it was her. The worst part was what Karen did after eating our food. She would set her plate with the leftovers on the kitchen floor for her cat to eat from. She would leave these plates there for days. If I didn't pick them up, there would be multiple plates on the floor with food in various stages of decay. All my dishes started disappearing except for the cat's plates on the floor. The dishes that were left, she refused to wash ever. Karen used my toilet paper, my laundry soap, even my feminine products. She would use panty liners every day, changing them multiple times, and stuff them in the bathroom garbage can. She would leave it overflowing and spilling onto the floor for days until I couldn't stand it anymore and had to put on gloves to throw them out. This went on for about 2 months and kept getting worse. Then one day, I grabbed my camera bag from the living room and felt my heart sink. The bag was way too light. I opened it and my expensive digital camera was gone. It was a gift from my parents and worth over $1,000. I was a photography hobbyist dreaming of going professional, and this camera was everything to me. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew it was either Karen or her sketchy boyfriend. That was it. That was the last straw. I went from nice girl to complete psycho in about 30 seconds. I'm not violent and I hate confrontation, but I wasn't waiting for an eviction process I couldn't afford anyway. Karen wanted to live here rent-free, stealing my stuff, hitting on my boyfriend, and neglecting her cat. Fine, but it was going to be on my terms. Here's the important part. In my divorce, I took everything from the house to my new apartment. I owned all the furniture, appliances, everything. The lease was in my name only. I started by changing the Wi-Fi password and the computer password. The following week, I had the cable company remove the cable lines to her room. I bought a small fridge for my bedroom and a cabinet, then moved all my food and personal supplies into my room with a secure lock on the door. When her cat went to the bathroom on the floor, I would pick it up and smear it on her bedroom door handle. Those overflowing bathroom trash cans filled with her panty liners. I dumped them on her bed. I removed the knobs from the washer and dryer so she couldn't use them. I did everything possible to make her life uncomfortable. A few months earlier, when we worked at the same store, Karen had borrowed another co-worker's laptop. She got fired but never gave the laptop back. The co-worker was desperately trying to get it back, but Karen was ignoring her completely. While Karen was out one day, I went into her room, took the laptop, and gave it back to its rightful owner. Karen called the cops on me and accused me of stealing her computer. When the police arrived, I explained what had really happened. Karen had to admit to the officers that the computer wasn't actually hers, and they told her it wasn't their problem anymore. That one really made her hate me. Since Karen wasn't working, she had no money to do anything or buy anything. She was literally just existing in a room in my apartment. She would disappear during the day, but I have no idea where she was going. After about 6 weeks of this, she finally moved out. I didn't even know she had left until I noticed she hadn't been coming or going for about a week. My boyfriend and I cleaned out her room and found the most disgusting mess I've ever seen. She left clothes, broken furniture, a cardboard dresser, and 539-gallon garbage bags worth of trash. We collected piles of panty liners, rotting food, and regular trash from every corner of the room. It's a miracle we didn't have roaches. I found all my missing dishes, silverware, and cups covered in food and grossness. I just threw everything away rather than try to clean it. I wish I still had the photos of that room. About 6 months later, I opened my back door to take out trash and found my camera in a bag hanging from the doorknob. I know Karen didn't return it, so I'm guessing her boyfriend's conscience finally got to him. For about 2 years after, every time I found out Karen was living with someone new, I would text them and send photos of her room, papers in the trash that had her name on them. I would tell them the whole story. One time it caused the people she was living with to throw her stuff out on the porch. She had just moved in and they had small kids. They didn't want to risk it with her around. I stopped after that incident. Karen knew it was me, so I figured I had sufficiently made my point. I'm just a regular guy in my 20s, living a pretty normal life. Back in high school, I was actually into slap fighting. Yeah, it's a real thing, but these days I mostly just watch from the sidelines. I used to compete in local tournaments, and let me tell you, it's not as simple as it looks. There's real technique involved, timing, precision, and you need serious pain tolerance. I made some great friends in that community, and even though I stepped back from competing after graduation, I still love watching the matches. For those who don't know, slap fighting is exactly what it sounds like. Two people take turns slapping each other across the face until one can't continue. It's got rules, referees, and a surprisingly passionate following. The local park has this unofficial arena where enthusiasts gather on weekends to test their skills. It's become this tight-knit community where everyone knows everyone. So there I was last Saturday, sitting on my usual bench watching the action when this whole mess started. There was this girl in a wheelchair sitting in the front row. She's the younger sister of one of the most legendary competitors in our local scene. Her brother is this massive guy who's basically unbeatable in the ring. Real gentle giant type, but when he slaps, it's like thunder. The girl was quietly watching the matches, not bothering anyone. Then this woman shows up with her kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Right away, I could tell she was trouble. She had that look, like the world owed her something. Karen walked right up to the girl and demanded she move out of that seat immediately. She said her son needed it more than the girl did. The girl looked confused and politely explained that she couldn't really stand for long periods, and that this was the only spot where she could see properly. Karen scoffed and accused the girl of milking her condition for sympathy. She said people like her always played the victim card. The girl was being so polite, but this woman was getting more aggressive by the second. A few other people started paying attention to what was happening. Karen went on about how she paid good money to bring her kid there and that they deserved the best seats. She insisted the girl could watch from anywhere. The girl tried to explain that she wasn't trying to cause trouble and just wanted to watch her brother compete. Karen laughed harshly and said she doubted anyone related to the girl could be worth watching. That's when things got really ugly. Without any warning, Karen reached over and slapped the girl hard across the face. The sound echoed through the crowd, and everyone went dead silent. The girl started crying, holding her cheek in shock. I jumped up from my bench, but before I could even move, I heard this roar from across the arena. The girl's brother had seen everything, and he was charging over like an angry bull. This guy is probably 6'5" and built like a truck, with hands that could probably crush a watermelon. The brother roared and demanded to know who had just put their hands on his sister. Karen suddenly realized she might have made a mistake. Her face went pale when she looked up at this mountain of a man. Karen stammered that she didn't know the girl was his sister and claimed the girl was being difficult and wouldn't move. The brother asked if she thought it was okay to hit a girl in a wheelchair. Karen defended herself by saying she just wanted her son to have a good view and that the girl was being selfish. The brother's face was turning red with rage. I could see his fists clenching, and I knew this was about to get really bad. The whole crowd was watching now, and you could feel the tension in the air. I quickly suggested we call the police and handle this properly. I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency services. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the park. They started taking statements from everyone who witnessed what happened. The officer told Karen that multiple witnesses saw her strike the young lady and that this constituted assault. Karen protested that this was ridiculous and claimed she barely touched the girl. She accused the girl of being dramatic just because she was in a wheelchair. The officer told Karen that she was under arrest for assault and began reading her rights. But Karen wasn't done making things worse for herself. Karen sarcastically asked if the officer was serious and complained about having to deal with that wheelchair-bound burden ruining their view. She declared that the girl didn't even belong there with normal people. The entire crowd gasped. Even her own kid looked embarrassed. The officer's expression went from professional to disgusted. But before anyone could react, the brother had heard enough. In one swift motion, he delivered a slap that would go down in local legend. The sound was like a gunshot, and Karen crumpled to the ground unconscious. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The officer told the brother that he was also under arrest for assault. The brother simply said it was worth it. When they handcuffed him, he looked back at his sister and asked if she was okay. His sister told him she was fine and thanked him for standing up for her. The ambulance arrived to take Karen away on a stretcher. She was still unconscious, and frankly, nobody seemed too concerned about her condition. Her kid was picked up by another family member who looked mortified by the whole situation. The brother was led away in handcuffs, but he held his head high. The crowd gave him a standing ovation when he walked to the police car. Everyone knew he'd face consequences, but we also knew he'd done what any decent person would do. Later that week, I heard through the community that Karen tried to press charges, but with so many witnesses backing up what really happened, the prosecutor wasn't interested. She ended up facing her own assault charges and had to pay medical bills for the girl's therapy sessions. The brother spent one night in jail but was released the next morning. The slap-fighting community rallied around him, covering his legal fees and making sure his sister got the support she needed. A local news station even picked up the story, and suddenly everyone was talking about the guy who knocked out an entitled woman for hitting his disabled sister. Karen never showed her face at the park again. Word got around the community about what she'd done, and she became something of a local pariah. Her social media accounts were flooded with people calling her out, and she eventually deleted them all. The brother went on to win the next 3 tournaments, and every time he competed, the crowd would chant his name. His sister became something of a mascot for the community, and everyone made sure she always had the best seat in the house. This happened back in 1980, so bear with me. I was just an 11-year-old kid from a tiny town in Nova Scotia, complete with pigtails, ribbons, and scabbed knees from all my adventures. That summer, my family took a trip to Toronto to visit my grandmother. For a small town kid like me, Toronto was absolutely massive. We're talking about the Jane and Finch area, which even back then had quite the reputation. The smell of garbage baking in the July heat was overwhelming, and honestly, the whole place felt pretty intimidating. About a week into our visit, I had a scary encounter with some local teenagers who thought it would be fun to mess with the small town kid. They cornered me near the apartment building, making threats and laughing when I got scared. After that, I stuck close to my parents like glue, too afraid to wander off even a little bit. But grocery shopping day changed everything. The Independent Grocers Association store was right across the street from my grandmother's apartment, so my mom and I walked over together. The moment we stepped inside, I was amazed. There were people speaking different languages, families from all over the world, and foods I'd never seen before. Small town me was probably staring pretty obviously, but I couldn't help myself. I held tight to the shopping cart handle and started to relax for the first time since that scary encounter. The store felt safe somehow, with all these families just doing their normal grocery shopping. When we got to the checkout line, I noticed this elderly Asian couple ahead of us. They had several bags full of the most beautiful peaches I'd ever seen, perfectly ripe and golden. I watched them curiously, wondering what they were saying to each other and why they needed so many peaches. Maybe they were making preserves or something special. The couple paid for their groceries, still chatting away in their language, and then walked toward the mall entrance. But here's the thing. They left all their peaches behind on the counter. Every single bag. The checkout clerk called out after them, trying to get their attention about the forgotten peaches, but they were already too far away and couldn't hear her over the noise of the store. I watched them slowly shuffle away, getting smaller and smaller in the distance. I looked at those bags of peaches sitting there, then back at the couple. They were moving slowly, so I knew I could catch up if I ran. But the memory of those teenagers from a few days ago was still fresh in my mind. What if something bad happened? What if I got lost? I bit my lip and looked up at my mom. I told her I could be fast and that those people needed their peaches. My mom hesitated. She knew how scared I'd been since the incident, but she could also see how much I wanted to help. She finally agreed but warned me to be fast, not to stop for anything, and to come right back to her. She promised she'd be right behind me. I grabbed those bags of peaches and took off running. My heart was pounding, partly from fear, partly from determination. Those people had paid for their peaches and they deserved to have them. I wasn't going to let some bullies stop me from doing the right thing. I caught up to the couple about a minute later. They were standing by a bench in the mall area, and I could tell they were upset. The woman kept patting her husband's arm and looking back toward the store. They'd obviously realized they'd forgotten something. I was suddenly shy, standing there with their bags. I didn't know a word of their language, so I just tapped the man gently on the arm and held out the bags with a big smile. I said the word peaches, since that was all I could think of. The transformation was instant. Both of their faces lit up with the biggest smiles I'd ever seen. They started chattering excitedly to each other, then to me, even though I couldn't understand a word. The woman kept bowing and stroking my cheek, and the man was nodding so enthusiastically I thought his head might fall off. I had no idea what they were saying, but their relief and joy were impossible to miss. They were so happy to have their peaches back. By then, my mom had caught up to us, slightly out of breath. She mentioned that she was getting worried about me. The couple turned their attention to her, chattering away and gesturing at me. I think they were trying to tell her what a good kid I was because they kept smiling and patting my shoulder. I felt so proud of myself. For the first time since arriving in Toronto, I've been brave instead of scared. I'd helped someone instead of hiding behind my parents. It felt amazing. When we started to walk back toward the store, the elderly man stopped me one more time. He reached into one of the bags and pulled out the most perfect peach I'd ever seen. He pressed it into my hands with another bow and a stream of words I couldn't understand. but his meaning was crystal clear. This was my reward for being kind and brave. I bit into that peach right there in the mall, and I swear it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. Not just because it was perfectly ripe, but because I'd earned it by doing something good for someone else. The funny thing is, I never found out what language they were speaking or why they needed so many peaches. But it didn't matter. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.